All right, welcome everyone. We're going to go start our event in a few seconds. I guess 30 to 60 seconds. We'll let some folks join in. We're enjoying our nice gray weather here in New Jersey, Shail. I assume it's nice and beautiful where you are in California.
It's wonderfully nice and gray.
All right, we're all in the gray mode these days. So I know Ram is down the street for me, I guess, compared to where Shail is. So. All right, I think we should start. Everyone, I've been having a lot of conversations with prospects and peers. Everybody's been talking about Gen AI. I've had conversations with quite a few folks, and one of the topics that has been really top of mind is the business has been asking for us, at least on the technologist side, right, who are enabling this technology. Business has been asking about generative AI. They want us to deliver platforms and capabilities using generative AI, but there is a concern around governance, risks, mitigations. That's been a big concern for a lot of folks that I've been speaking to. So we figured we'd talk about specifically generative AI governance, addressing the risks, making sure that your systems are secure. As always, we're going to be practical about these things. We're going to talk to some industry experts today. We have a great panel today with Shail and Ram. I'll do a quick introduction. We'll talk about some of the questions that you should be asking, some of the risks posed by generative AI. So I'm going to stop sharing this introductory screen so that we can see us. I'm going to go first from intros because it's going to be tough to follow Ram and Shail's intro. So I'll just go first. I'm the CEO and Chief Automation Officer here at Accelirate. We're a niche automation and AI company focusing on intelligent automation and analytics powered by AI. So that's enough about me. If you want to know more about us, feel free to visit accelerate.com. Reach out to us. First, I'll introduce Shail. Shail is a good friend. I've known him for a long time. Shail K is a visionary leader. I don't say that lightly. He's been involved in the automation and AI industry for quite a while. He's truly a global technologist. His tenure spans North America, Europe, Asia. He's led public companies, venture-backed technology firms. He's grown companies. He's turned them around. He's led acquisitions. He's built, all while building world-class teams. Not to mention, he's also a published author on intelligent automation. In fact, working on his second book, which is very interesting, Personal Identity in the Age of Generative AI. I'm looking forward to that, Shail. Not only that, he's a practitioner. Apart from that, I think it's a great service back to the community. Shail founded a group called Vocal, a voice of the customer in AI and automation landscape with quite a few, I think it's 90 or so world-leading brands where he gets folks together to talk about automation and AI. Shail, say hello to everyone and add if I miss something.
No, that was fantastic. I would not be surprised if I get a call from Oprah after this kind of an introduction. Thank you for the introduction. It's great to be here, and thank you all for joining today.
All right, I'll be sure to do a generative AI for you and a generative AI for you at the end of this call. Moving on to RamKumar A, again, a very near and dear friend. I've known Ram professionally for a very long time. Ram runs a quality engineering, automation, and DevOps team at Citi Group within the markets division. Ram has worked at quite a few investment banks. He's known for establishing industry-leading automation practices. At Citi, Ram's team was one of the first ones to build generative AI applications using LLMs, integrating with internal data sources. They're also focusing on building integration of Gen AI capabilities within existing processes. Ram has told me to mention this, that his views today are, some of them might be personal and might not necessarily represent the views of Citi Group. Thank you so much, Ram, for joining us. I'm glad you could join us today.
Thank you, Ahmed, and great to be here part of this webinar.
Perfect. So I think, talking about generative AI, I think AI has been around for long enough. People have been using artificial intelligence in different aspects of business use cases. However, I think generative AI has now come to a general definition of AI capable of generating text, images, or other data, generally in response to a prompt. I think the significance of the general purpose use, code generation, data analysis, the creativity of generative AI is what intrigues everyone. And I think it has broad applications. I think everywhere from creating marketing copies, brand voices, to generation of images, to processing invoices, the mundane type business processes, right? So the application's been very broad. Would love to open that up to Shail and Ram. Shail first, to see what are the sort of broad applications you're seeing that at least the businesses are asking you to implement generative AI from. What gets them going? I know there's a lot of conversations and they get confused between traditional models versus generative AI models, but if you could speak a little bit to what the broad applications you're seeing out there. So Shail first and then Ram.
Yeah, happy to. I think the significance of generative AI cannot be overstated. It's the driving force behind some of the most innovative and transformative applications that we see today, right? From personalized content creation, drug discovery, to advanced customer service bots and beyond. And I think generative AI is reshaping industries in many shape or form. However, it's not just about the technology's ability to create, it's also about the potential to solve real world problems. For example, in healthcare, generative AI is being used to design new molecules for drug development, potentially speeding up the time that it takes to bring new treatments to the market. In the creative industries, it's enabling artists and designers to push the boundaries of their creativity, generating unique art pieces and instrumental designs. In the industrial AI space, as an example, a space where I'm involved in and founded a company. In the industrial AI space, generative AI with machine learning, with other associated technologies, is streamlining operational efficiency and reducing significant costs, and most importantly, saving resources like water and gas and chemicals. So I think while generative AI has these unprecedented opportunities for advancement, it also introduces a complex set of challenges and risks that we must navigate very carefully. Ram, what are your thoughts?
What are your broad you're the investment bank, and you guys have all sorts of business processes and applications. What are you seeing?
Yeah, I know it's a great point. Like, one of the things I ask myself is, like, fast forward, like, what aspect of my life will not be touched by AI? I think that's the way I look at it. And if you look at, like, from financial industry standpoint, there's like bunch of use cases really ranging from, like, you call your customer service and a bank of some problem, like how does it really reduce your average wait time or get a better response from customer standpoint? Or if you're a high net worth individuals, like how do you really provide a tailored financial advice to your needs using proprietary data and your client preferences, right? Or even if you take, like, institutional clients and hedge funds, they trade with you, like how do you understand the trading patterns to better help your institutional clients, or even provide some cross-selling opportunities, right? And even if you look at, like, from other aspects of, like, trade surveillance and monitoring, which are very complex in nature, like there are a lot of anomalies can really happen, which can really not happen across through your eyes. Like, how do you really, identify those things and really, catch that? That's all, as a use case if we're looking at it. I think you touched upon this, Ahmed, earlier. Like, I think three broad applications I see is evolving. One is like, content generations, which is like basically you're generating contents based on new and also like assisting your existing content preparation, whether it's like sales team using it to kind of create a pitch deck, or you creating new markets insights reports based on real-time market trends, or you're kind of building your interconnected data search of to kind of do some lead generation or even do knowledge management of your existing data. And third is like, again, your tech and ops productivity improvement, like where you improve your developer productivity using tools like GitHub Copilot, or even integrating with your existing RPA automation. These are, I see, as three major trends in terms of application development.
That's very interesting. You mentioned that, Ram. We recently launched our test automation practice, right? And from that perspective, it was very interesting to see that the pace at which the code is being generated, it's amazing, right? I give everyone this example. We had a architecture meeting the other day, and one of our guys took the notes from Teams and was able to feed that into an LLM, a Codex LLM, and able to generate code that this was a meeting where he was explaining that code to one of his junior developers, and he's like, well, they generated the code for me, and it was actually pretty decent. So it's really interesting. I think the generative abilities of these models will really be touching all aspects of our lives, which is interesting. And us in technology really are thinking through what are the questions we should ask, and that's a good segue into the next section of our conversation here. We figured we'd do a couple of things. I don't think we have the time today to cover all mitigations and all risks. So I think the interesting thing that I have been asked quite a bit is, look, I think we kind of can get to the mitigations, but even more important than just the mitigations are what questions should we be asking ourselves? And this is folks who are responsible for implementing generative AI. They're asking me this, right? They're saying, what questions should we be asking? What are the questions that we should be answering when it comes to various aspects of implementing? So we kind of broke it down into a few different categories, and we'll go one by one through data privacy, security, misinformation, ethical use, moral implications. But let's start first with data privacy and security. And I think recently we've seen all sorts of data privacy issues. I think it was really interesting. Some folks spent like $200 on OpenAI and gave it silly prompts of a single word, and eventually were able to extract some PII out of the model, right? So it's data privacy and security. How do you prevent data from coming in and going out? The usual aspects of masking data may not work because whether the word is a noun or a verb makes a difference in a prompt. So you might not be able to take a name and just put stars and asterisks next to it. So I think it would be good to hear Ram and then Shail around what are the complexities of data privacy, not particularly the mitigations, but just what are the questions that you're asking around data privacy and security around these generative AI implementations. So Ram, to you first.
Sure. I think when I look at data privacy or security, this is even pre-existing before generative AI. I think what makes a difference in my view is like it's really become very pivotal when it really goes into generative AI, because if you don't have a proper data strategy and governance and venturing into generative AI, you're going to completely worsen your situations and just increase overall complexity of your entire firm. I think from my perspective, there are a couple of things really. So you need to have a general overarching AI governance framework that includes like how you are actually approaching AI application deployment and development. And that should include like what kind of data you're collecting, how are you processing, how are you storing, how are you sharing this information. That's super important. And then second aspect is like, what are the roles and responsibilities around the data handling and the established governance around data protection aspect of it. This is also super important. Now, you could really build AI applications and what kind of access control you're having. You could really have a multi-tenant applications of generative AI. Then you have multiple people are really coming in. Who has access to what data? Because when you go into the old large language model, then whatever model can really give based on the vector embeddings, it's going to come out. So if you have multiple people are going in there, so you need to make sure you're actually segregating your vector stores, even though they're all part of the same company. You need to make sure that's segregated out so that they're not like accessing each other's information beyond your multi-factor authentication. The other element which you touched upon, Ahmed, which is important, is around data privacy. Like, okay, that you have to take into consideration of all aspects of AI applications, from your data loading to chunking to vector store, even to retrieval, right? All those aspects, those guardrails needs to be in place. Whether it is, you're using any customer data or any personal identifiable data. Like, we did some tests, like for example, some of the aspects blocks like at gmail.com or at citi.com, but then if you really put like atciti.com, it allows it, right? So you need to make sure you have all those different testing elements, look into it. Last but not least, I would really also point out is like around the cyber attacks, which is really can really get your data breach out. Like financial institutions, we've seen like a lot of cyber attacks significantly increasing. So in the event of cyber attacks, like how are you actually governing your data breach? That's super important. You need to really think around that. Right now, you can't have your conventional approach. That's not going to really work. So you need to really run war game scenarios to handle the situation, because regulators are looking for you to prove that you can handle those situations. These are the questions, comes in my mind when we look at it.
Shail, add to that?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with what you just shared, Ram. I think generative AI thrives on data to create new and innovative content. Yet, I think it opens the ability and opens the door to risks such as unauthorized use of data, security breaches. We talked about that. The dynamic nature of cyber threats, constantly evolving. Let me paint an example for you. Today is Tuesday. We're doing this webinar. It's Super Tuesday. It's a major election day in the US. And the news coming out this morning is that Facebook is down. Users are reporting, sessions expired. There are concerns around election interference from, other countries. This is live as we are doing this webinar. This is going on in the US. So this dynamic nature of cyber threats is very real. I think a strong ethical framework is necessary. Governance is critically important, but this framework is necessary to ensure that technologies respect privacy rights. Addressing these risks, I think, requires a blend of technological solutions, legal compliance, and a security conscious culture and a posture, both from AI creators and AI users as well.
That's perfect. I think you guys touched upon a couple of other areas that we're going to talk about. Look, I think securing data has been a priority for enterprises for a while. It's not new. However, I think there are specific challenges in employing and deploying generative AI solutions, especially if they are customer facing or they're publicly accessible. That really sort of increases your attack surface area, as they like to refer to it in cybersecurity. But they're sort of model theft, data poisoning. Do you guys look at sort of questions again? We'll talk about the mitigations, but what questions do you ask, and what are the aspects of security that weren't sort of as important? Look, I think it was we were always worried about somebody stealing our data, but I don't think we were as worried about somebody adding to our data, right? which is interesting. That's model poisoning, right? Data poisoning, which is a really interesting sort of twist of we're now worried about quietly somebody coming in and adding to our data and making our models worse. talk a little bit about what you guys think about what keeps you up at night in terms of security vulnerabilities. Ram, what are you thinking of? And Shail, what are you hearing as well?
Yeah, I think like this is a serious concern, and I think it kind of like goes back into two aspects. I look at it like, where do you keep your data and security, whether it's within your data center or your external, right? That's one key element, because what are the variables you're really adding into it? And then when you really look at into the model element of it, I think there are key aspects, as to look at this, like around you have like a lot of threat modeling solutions already in place to really understand your application vulnerabilities and scans. Now that needs to be expanded more into looking at these elements of like generative AI, data poisoning, as you talked about, or even model drift around that. Those things needs to be added into your threat modeling capabilities, right? Number one. The second element is also like, in terms of like when you look at like data governance element, like you have to understand like, where is your data manipulation and anomaly detection can really happen within your model. So like without having an understanding of it, even monitoring around it, you're going to be really flying blind into this area. And like you could have your manipulation happening where you have no sense of identification until an event happened or some regulators coming and knocking your door and then say, hey, by the way, you're having this issue. So like how is your monitoring of these techniques and solutions in place around that is also super important. Now, the third element is like you have like an inside actor, right, which is not an external actor. You have an inside actor who can actually also can do malicious attempts to. So you have things like a prompt to like a code, you have a prompt to SQL. So what if somebody says, okay, you know what, oh, I'm going to send, okay, can you delete a table for me, right? So it can really take and it can really go and delete it for you. So there are like prompt injections can really happen. So where, how do you make sure you sanitize those things and really potentially harmful elements? All those things in my view is going to be super important, which probably not something we thought about it earlier. Now that's something which we need to look into it.
Perfect.
Yeah,
Go ahead,
go
Shail,
ahead.
please.
No, I was just going to say, I think generative AI holds a mirror to the data that we feed to it, essentially. And I think the rise of data poisoning, as we talked about, or even deep fakes, which are very prominent, or prompt injections, as Ram mentioned, I think these are very real. And the big problem is that we can't trust what we see online. It becomes really hard to know what's real or not, and that's why it's important to educate on how to tell the difference and how to work on making tools that spot these issues that are coming up in the market.
Shail, you bring up an interesting point, right? And there are two topics that we talk about: misinformation and social impact, and ethical and moral implications. I think they're sort of related, sort of misinformation, social impact. I think more important for folks who are building tools on top of LLMs or generative AI tools for various purposes, right? I think one thing is to control it internally for your own use, but then once you develop a tool and then hand it off to the users, right? It's like we're me and Ram, we've been in the QA realm for quite a bit. It's always, you'd be surprised what a user can come up with, and you never thought somebody would use a system that way, and they figure out a way to do certain things. Shail, if you could talk, you're part of Vocal. I think they're both sort of internal use cases that people are talking to you about, external facing use cases. Talk a little bit about this misinformation, social impact, ethical and moral implications. What are the questions that one needs to be asking when they're sort of going on this journey of deploying Gen AI solutions on these aspects of misinformation, or the ethical and moral implications of using generative AI?
I think the number one question is, do we have the right data? And it starts with data. It's the feeder into majority of the AI models that are out there. I think the normalizing, rationalizing, cleansing of data is becoming critically important. In Vocal, there isn't a call that goes by without us talking about generative AI. And there are multiple use cases: revenue generation, incremental revenue generation use cases, cost enhancement use cases, productivity enhancement use cases, as an example. And in all of these, data becomes the critical sort of linchpin to drive these use cases and their outcomes. So it starts with data. I think the other key question to ask is, do you have the appropriate um, digital literacy in your organization to help people understand the implications of the prompts that they're using, the recurrence of and proliferation of sensitive data that can get out there through generative AI. There are multiple, most recent instances like that where code has, proprietary code has appeared on generative AI systems and in public LLMs. I think that's a key concern as well. We're starting to see more and more companies opt for smaller LLM, privately developed LLM models within organizations. Banks, as an example, that have and function in a highly regulatory environment. And Ram, you might have an opinion on this. Are looking at how do we contain these LLMs rather than putting information out on public LLMs.
Yeah, so Ram, I'm sure you've been having these conversations internally. What are the questions that people should be asking when it comes to
Yeah,
the impact and the ethical implications?
I think I agree with what Shail is saying, as about also around understanding, whether you go open source or closed source models and where you deploy that. And that really is super important when you really talk about like in here. Now, there is also another element I would really add is like, because like if you look at investment bank sites, so they have already have AI models already in place in terms of automated trading. The biggest risk I see is like you have misinformations coming in, and then these automated trading systems are really trained to trade on the back of information that is coming up in the market. So by the time you could really realize it's a fake information, you could really wipe out billions of dollars from the market by moving markets in a different way. So you have to really think differently in terms of your scanning of like this misinformation from enterprise standpoint. Like, okay, do we have a mechanism to scan across the net, like, okay, what are the fake contents are getting populated as we speak, and like, what is your response plan to that? That has to be much quicker than maybe of your regular other response plan, and that needs to be done in a bit of a more fire drill mode. Like, okay, if this even happens, what's my contingency plan? What are the actions I will do? You have to do that more practically on a regular basis to make sure that when that even happens, you're not scrambling to figure out, okay, what do we have to do, right? So that is super important when we look at like, and we're building this. The other things, also like around like, in terms of like, biases and everything we talked about. I think Shail mentioned about the data. Like, we inherently have all these biases in whatever work we do. And when we train the model with all those biases. So what do we have as right representation of data is super important when we look at that.
Yeah, that's really interesting, right? I think Gemini has been in the news for trying to address that, right or wrong, whatever that is. Don't have a particular opinion on that, but I think it could create a lot of noise for a brand or a organization if these things are not thought through. And again, at the end of the day, I think as Ram, as you mentioned, we're going to talk about some mitigations. However, I really think that they have these implications can have a very strong negative impact on the brand itself if not addressed up front, right? So I think it's really important from a risk standpoint to understand the use case and understand who is the audience of the output, whether that whether that output again can can be misconstrued either by an internal user or an external customer, or can be acted upon. Again, I think we've been doing sentiment analysis on things for a while now. Now you actually have the ability to take a news article and actually figure out a little bit more detail than just positive sentiment, negative sentiment, actually actions on what's going on. These LLMs will provide you summaries of things which can be acted upon, so on and so forth. I think that introduces, as Ram mentioned, another level of scrutiny that's required on the output from the model than just, hey, this was a positive or a negative sentiment on a particular ticker that's mentioned in this article, or brand that's in there. That's really interesting. So I think moving on to the strategies for mitigation, right? I think I think that would be a good takeaway from this. By the way, I think there's a LinkedIn user has a question. I'll pose that to you guys, Shail. Does the increased reliance on integration of LLMs into our value chain introduce the human risks back into the chain that we'd abstracted away through automation? That's a very interesting question. I think, Shail, I'd love to get your opinions on this.
I think it depends on the information. It goes back to the data, right? Data is the mirror in this equation. So it really depends on the integration to LLMs. What kind of information are you pushing back into that chain? Does it actually impact the value? Yes, I believe it does, and it depends on the sensitivity of that information that you're putting in. Ram, any thoughts from you?
No, I agree with you. That's
interesting. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I couldn't hear you for a second.
There was a bit of a lag, Ahmed. Can you repeat the question?
Are we good?
Yeah.
Perfect. So moving on to the next section of strategies and mitigation, I think it's we would all agree that a overarching governance model needs to be created in the enterprise, which again needs to address people, process, technology, right? Let's go back to the basics. You have to figure out who are the folks involved in governing this technology. What are the what are the processes that we're going to put in place in order to monitor, approve, develop, so on and so forth? And what is the technology stack that supports both this governance, whether it be monitoring, whether it be development tools, whether it be models going to use, whether that is going to be in-house or external? That's a given. I think from a mitigation standpoint, Ram, I'd love to hear from you. You've spoken about some of these things. However, I would love to hear from you about, from developing secure generative AI systems, what are the best practices, methodologies that you're using with security and privacy in mind? Because you've been implementing this in a highly regulated regulated environment. There's a lot of money at risk when it comes to what you're doing. Talk a little bit about what mitigation techniques you're using, especially as they relate to security and best practices.
Sure. I think there's a couple of factors we look at it. Like, one is like when you look at the model itself, at the point I touched upon, like, are you going to use open source or closed source models? And if you have open source models, are you actually internally hosting versus like, are you sending any sort of data outside to open source models, like, let's say, OpenAI? We've seen like a lot of open source models which are really powerful, and they are as good as like what you could really see as GPT-4. So in terms of the data that you're really dealing with, if you're reading sensitive data, confidential data, I think Shail pointed out about like having some data code going out. So in those cases, like, we're really focusing on actually building those solutions in-house where the model is hosted inside your data center. So the data never really leaves your premises. That kind of gives like one set of another control. The other aspect we look at is around like data access control and data minimization in training the model. We need to really make sure that, okay, when we train the model, we don't necessarily overtrain with too much data. We need to train the model with the right set of data, what it really needs to know, right? It's always easy to say, well, let's dump everything in there and then let it answer it, right? We should not do that. We should really train what it really is supposed to know and build it. And then also, like, we talked about the document scanning and sensitivity around, like, what data goes in and the RAG. The other element is also look at, like, from security aspect of it, like, if you're building common APIs, which is going to talk to like different internal or external large language models, you want to really externalize it it to your application. So you have a single interface that is really talking to all the different models. Let's say if you're talking to, let's say, Gemini and OpenAI, you have a common API, you can really build it. So that way you can really put all your guardrails in there, right? So you not really want to leave that to each individual application to do what is right, but rather you do it as an enterprise level and really build it right from one get-go. And the guardrails is super important for me when you look at like in the entire pipeline, whether it is like we talked about, like what prompt should be allowed. Okay, do you have a bias in hallucinations in terms of like, what comes out of the models? How do you really detect that? Toxicity, like whether it is even like the prompt the user is putting versus what is actually coming out from the model. So you need to have those guardrails that is in place, whether it is going into the model, going out from data into the model, and also like what is coming out of the large language model, like in every places you want to have. And ideally what you should also do here is like we should also put all the regulation that you're supposed to comply with, and you actually add that part of the guardrails and build validations around it. And explainability is a super important aspect of this model, right? Because how do you really prove that your model is actually producing the right outcome? Right, that's a super important, both from your internal customer standpoint, external customer standpoint, and regulator standpoints. You need to see that, right? So using tools like explainability AI, where you can really see, okay, what is the model is, what is the context the model got before it really gave the output. So can build that, and you need to make sure it's all like in an auditable format, right? So you can actually constantly do the human in the loop on validation of what the model gave. Is it really gave the right input? Like you can really go back into internal controls, external controls. You can really go and do that. And the other aspect, two aspects I would just point out is like, which is probably non-attractive, but it is super important, is like you need to really focus on automating your entire process from model deployment to your vector store backups and everything. I've seen so many cases people don't focus on that, and then like something got crashed, and then you have to continually do it, right? So this is super important looking at it. And last but not least, like is your user training, right? Like train your users internally and externally. Like, this is not like, gonna solve everything, right? It's gonna solve what you fed as a data, rather than like, it's not gonna solve like a world hunger, like by asking questions. So these are the factors we look at it.
Perfect. No, I think it's really important, right? And you touched upon different things which are really interesting, right? I think as you mentioned, I think we mentioned earlier as well, augmenting of the LLM gets done through vector databases and documents and that you might provide. I mean, we've seen all sorts of weird things, right? If you just went and added code, for instance, for a codex type of model, and some properties files had some addresses for some internal systems or usernames, or it all depends on what you have. And interestingly, to do data access control on those vector embeddings that are going into the model is a challenge, because before you could just say, hey, listen, I don't have access to this, put a where clause in the SQL. Here you're just saying, here's the data store and all of that stuff. So what you just mentioned, the rags where you can control what goes in as context to the model even before even before it gets fed into it. You have to really get access control and data control, and the quality of the data that you're feeding. I think that's really important. Good point there, Ram. I think you talked a little bit about the explainability and fostering sort of. I'm skipping over one of the things, and we'll get back to the regulatory aspect of things. I think it's important to understand from a confidence and fostering sort of the transparency and trust into the systems that you develop. You mentioned a little bit about explainability at AI. What are the things that you're doing that will make sure that people can trust what's coming out of it? You very briefly mentioned hallucinations. What are sort of techniques that you're using to really reduce that? Again, we've seen over and over again, LLMs tend to just produce things even when you tell them don't hallucinate, don't make up stuff. They just tend to make up stuff. So it would be great to hear both from you and after you, Shail, on what folks are doing to follow sort of the trust in the technology.
I'm at you to understand. LLM default behavior is hallucination. And so if you're asking not to hallucinate, you're actually, and if you're asking not to hallucinate, that's why you put a rag in there to really say not to hallucinate. Now, I think the explanatory aspect of it is super important. I think we're really looking at this like in a couple of aspects. Like for example, we're using like from explainable AI standpoint, we're using something called like feature attribution, so where you can actually see how your model outcome is happening based on different factors, right? So you can actually provide different factors and how does your model outcome is happening. So that's something we're really putting in. The other aspect also we're looking at is like in terms of like okay model drift. Like so you have to have from model validation standpoints, you have to take okay, you ask X number of questions. Okay, how does a human would have answered for those questions? You have those details, and then you can provide the same input to the model, and then over a period of a time, and really see how is your model is providing a response. Now, the key aspect, this is what I really feel like a lot of the regulations really coming into is like okay, a set one you give some response back. Now you are actually adding more data into it, right? Now you get a new response back. You have to make sure you keep track of all your data sets that you're really using to feeding into the model and really prove which one gave what answers, right? And now you also have like old content and new content. So you need to make sure that you're actually putting a proper tagging of your data so that it doesn't really look into the old data and not necessarily give you the new data like based on your semantic search. So all these factors really come into play. Another aspect I also see is like, when we build these applications, even for internal, we tell the users, okay, don't trust the output blindly, right? So you have to have a human in the loop to really do a validations into it, at least in the initial places that we're really putting in. That's also like, we are looking at it. And in terms of hallucinations, we have other models in place, which are really checking, okay, whether your output is hallucinating. So you can actually constantly, you take an output of the model and constantly ask the same model with the different questions and to see whether it's giving it the same output or it's a different output. So there are other different techniques we're really using to say that like, okay, is the output is accurate to what we are asking. Again, it's a very interesting space and it's evolving. So Shail, what's your thoughts?
No, I agree with you. I think feature attribution is very interesting. I would love to talk to you more about it. That really perked my interest. But I think there are various other strategies that companies are incorporating, right? Data minimization, for example, where only the necessary data is collected as opposed to all data that goes into the system or into the model. Data anonymizing the data as an example, where personal identifiers are removed. Look, I think in the age of AI, privacy is not a luxury, but a battleground for, battleground of control versus freedom. Regular security audits are critically important as well, like health checks, ethical hacking, as an example, where trusted security professionals are going in and attempting a breach into the system to find vulnerabilities. I think these are some of the critical aspects. There's a lot going on in regulations and governance. If we want to touch that topic at the interest of time that we have, I'm happy to take a deeper dive into that as well.
Yeah, no, I think all really interesting points. I think one of the interesting things that you mentioned, Ram, is and I think there's a question in as well which talks about decision making for AI, right? So we're all about automation. We're all about how do you make sure that rules get applied to a particular workflow and they gets executed, but then there are always human decision making in the middle where the rules do not, where the data does not follow the rules that were predefined. Here it's really interesting because you don't really have a lot of the rules based stuff, because if there was, you would write if then statements for it anyways. But I think sort of what are the techniques you guys have seen in the market on what are folks doing in terms of decision making, putting a human in the loop? What are feedback mechanisms that you have in place? Shail, I'll go with you first and then Ram.
Yeah, look, I think this notion of AI being purely silicon is very valid, but don't forget the carbon component. The human component is very, very critical in AI. AI without human in the loop, with no human in the loop, carries significant risks. There are QA aspects that are very critical to how you build these models. Ram talked a little bit about that earlier. There are understanding of the regulatory aspects that are critically important in this scenario as well. That's why human in the loop becomes a very critical feature when it comes to AI deployment, AI testing, AI security. Uh, the question around decision making is very interesting as well, particularly for AI models, where you have to ensure that you eliminate the biases, the intrinsic biases that are occurring in these models. Some of them are known. Some of them can be known through the feature attribution aspect that Ram talked about. Ram,
No,
your thoughts?
yeah, go ahead, Ram.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. I think the human in the loop is super important, and I think especially if you're really building the systems where it is actually there is no human in the loop and the decisions is being made, and that's where you need to be super careful. And then whatever controls you have, let's say if something bad happens, how you pulling the plug, whether it is your kill switch or different things, you have to really test that. Okay, those really working on these new constraints of like automatic decision making happening on AI, and more importantly, you have to know there is such events happening. That's where the monitoring really comes into play. So all those factors goes into hand in hand in terms of implementing this.
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of folks step into it very carefully. I think for technologists at least, there is a very sort of critical step of expectation management, right? I think we all say, oh, great, now I can take this, this letter that somebody sent me for a dispute, and generative AI will tell me exactly what's in it, and I can act upon it right away. And then realizing that by regulation, you must address every single complaint in that letter, and if you haven't, you might be open to liabilities or fines and things like that. And then, so in order to mitigate that, you put that in front of the human. Now the business says, hey, if I have to look at it anyways, what's the point of having this technology help me? But I think that's the part of the expectation setting, right? We're in the initial phases, we're going to validate whether that's happening, what's the percentage, because I'm sure humans also miss a few of those things. Are the machines just as good as the humans or better at it, or not, right? So I think there's a lot of expectation setting from the business perspective to understand what initial implementations of generative AI would look like. What are the controls that are going to be in place to ensure that this solution really does work and can provide value? And then once that's been figured out, then going full scale with that solution. I think the other thing that's interesting to talk about is regulations from the regulators, right, and governance. So, for example, EU has published some regulations around generative AI. The Office of the President of the U.S. has sent a note to the executive order to the agencies to implement frameworks for AI use within the agencies, and I'm sure they're going to percolate down to private enterprises to say, hey, if we have to apply to, if this applies to us, then you must do this so that you're compliant with this. Shail, what are you seeing both US and globally in terms of regulations coming down? What are the questions people should be asking about what the regulators might want to know, what might want to think, and thinking through sort of forward thinking and sort of proofing, regulator proofing, if that's the word, your implementations.
Regulator proofing. I like that. Look, I think the onus of risk in AI does not necessarily lie with the technology or the technology vendor that you're using. It lies with the business itself. Such was the case with RPA and automation, as we saw it. Such is the case with AI as well. So the risk is on the business itself. The regulatory landscape, to your question, is constantly shifting and evolving as there are compliance practices and enforcement. I think the EU is leaning more towards a regulatory effort around controlling AI versus what is happening in the US. I do think that there are personal rights that are being violated in many ways with the advancement of AI, and there are various books and articles around that. But I think governance goes beyond compliance, though. It's about setting up internal policies and practices that define how the organization will manage its AI creations, right? It includes establishing internal ethical guidelines for AI development, creating an oversight committee for review and guide AI projects. and setting up the processes for accountability. Regulations and governance form the framework within which the power of AI is harnessed, but it reminds us that deploying AI isn't just a technology endeavor. It's about it's social and ethical as well. And I think that becomes a critical responsibility of the business that is driving it.
Perfect. I think with that, we're sort of towards the end. What I'm going to do is please put in all your questions in whichever platform you're listening to this in. We get these questions to us in real time. Shail, one of the questions that we got was, what are the implications of not implementing a governance framework? I think that's a pretty straightforward answer. I think I have an idea of what you might say. First you, then Ram.
Yeah, look, I think the risk is to your brand and to your business in many ways, right? Which is something that I have emphasized. I think those risks are very real. As I mentioned earlier, privacy is not a luxury in AI. It's a battleground for your brand, ensuring that you are compliant with the regulatory policies that your business follows. And I do think it's very, very important to pay attention to the governance and regulatory frameworks around AI.
Ram, what's the conversation around in your circles? What happens if we just go, cowboy style, just go implement this stuff and then figure out governance later? Or are we talking, no, we need to figure this out first before we implement stuff?
I would say before you figure out, your business will be shut down. Like I see this more of like, you say, well, I'm going to try flying blind on a mid-Atlantic Ocean with no real navigation. I feel I would really probably land somewhere, right? Yeah, good luck with that. It's going to be
no,
very
I think that's a good analogy right there. So I think in closing, we have a couple of minutes left. So I would love to go to Ram and Shail both in bullet point style, soundbite style, which we'll send out later, right? 3 most critical things that you want people to take away in terms of what they should be thinking about and implementing in generative AI governance security.
Ram, you want to go first?
Yeah, I'll go. So, I would say like the power of AI is pretty big. So really focus on which use case you're really picking, and then also really make sure you have the right data strategy and governance around it, and make sure you don't trust the output blindly. So you have to really make sure you're human in the loop and the validation in place. And also the other key aspect is you want to make sure you put all your guardrails, whether it's industry regulations or your internal enterprise guardrails. Those are all built in as part of your application pipeline. That's super important. You cannot really miss that. And last but not least is train your stakeholders and users around how to use the AI.
Perfect. Shail?
Yeah, my 3 are perhaps too simple. Look, I would say number 1 is listen to your data. Number 2 is balance the tech excitement and euphoria with digital literacy and people development. That is so critically important in this endeavor. And the 3rd is get a strong governance model in place.
Perfect. No, that was really good. There's actually one late question that came in. Do you think LLM will move to become more domain specific than being generic? I think Murli, that's happening now. We're seeing MedPalm and some of the other models that are very specific to. They're very specific code models, code generation models. I really think that yes, my opinion on this is that they will be, and there already are, domain-specific LLMs that will outperform a generic LLM in certain areas. But would love to hear, Ram, what are you seeing, especially in the financial services industry? Are you seeing the emergence of a domain-specific LLMs?
Yeah, I think this is going to eventually happen, where you're going to have either you're going to take a base model and then fine tune it with your own data set and really create curated response to that. I think there is going to be use cases for some generic LLMs, and then you combine with your data sets using RAG, and then there is going to be a huge focus on really domain specific LLMs to solve a specific problem, which is going to happen as well.
Shail?
Yeah, my short answer is absolutely yes, and it's actually happening now.
Perfect. Now, and by the way, Ram, you mentioned RAG a few times. We're going to do a technical webinar just talking about RAG because everybody talks about it on how you can implement it. And I bet you the Google searches on RAG just went up. So in the context of generative AI, I thank both of you. Thank you so much for giving us some time today. It was a very interesting conversation. The hour flew by very quickly. We really appreciate it. Folks, whichever platform that you're watching this on, look up our names, reach out to us. Would be more than happy to help you out and provide more information. Thank you very much, Shail. Thank you very much, Ram. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.
Have a great day. Bye bye.
Bye.